Afternoon. I'm Senator Liz Krueger, the 28th Senate District, covering much of the east side of Manhattan, Midtown Manhattan, the Times Square area, the Madison Square Garden, Penn Station area, and Roosevelt Island. I am so glad so many of you are able to join us this year, where yet again we made the decision we needed to do our annual Senior Resource Fair in a virtual mode. We used to do them when we could all be together, 800 of us, usually on the basement floor of Temple Emmanuel. It was a great setup, but given the continuation of new versions of COVID, we just thought we were smarter not to invite 800 people into one room. But we have broken this up into 3 afternoons. And we have found that actually communicating through webinar, having amazing guests, having the information that we can share with you afterwards has proved to be of great value to many people who may never have even been able to come to our in-person resource fairs. So I want to welcome everybody who's here. I want to make sure you know that whether you're on Zoom or Facebook, this is the virtual Senior Resource Fair, Session 1 on aging when you're solo. As always, we have closed captioning for today's event. As a viewer, you have to activate your closed captioning option to view the text on your device. It's really helpful if you even think you have minimal hearing loss to be able to read the text along with what you're hearing from people. So if you're on Zoom, click on live transcript in the meeting controls to start viewing the closed captioning. And if you're on Facebook Live, you'll see a setting button in the bottom right-hand corner of the video. Click on CC for closed captioning to activate the text coming along. This forum is being recorded, and everyone who RSVP'd will receive an email with links to all 3 of the recordings for the next 3 days of the virtual Senior Resource Fair sessions, and the resources that are posted in the chat, along with the presenters' PowerPoints, within about a week of the last session. Again, if you want to write things down, of course you can, but you'll get all this information afterwards, so you don't feel that you have to be scribbling as fast as you're hearing things. Before we begin, I want to just give an afternoon program update on COVID. As you, of course, have heard, we are experiencing a new COVID-19 wave. Even though this wave is not as severe as the other waves in the past, it is causing the number of coronavirus infections and hospitalizations to increase. And to help avoid contracting COVID, you may want to take precautionary measures, such as going back to wearing those masks that are all over your apartment, in public indoor locations, and around large groups of people. This is an important time to get vaccinated against COVID-19, the flu, and RSV if you are over the age of 60. You can get vaccinated at participating pharmacies, doctors' offices, health centers. Moderna, Novavax, and Pfizer all offer a 23-24 updated COVID-19 vaccine that has been approved by the FDA and the CDC. There is no data at this point that says one type of the vaccine is better than another. So I think you should feel comfortable getting vaccinated for COVID-19 with whichever vaccine is available. And again, even if you were taking vaccinations and boosters up till now from the old version, you're being strongly encouraged to take the new vaccine. It's actually a different vaccine targeting the new form of COVID that's wandering around our city and our lives right now. Okay, so now on to today's event. Today's Senior Resource Fair is the first of 3 sessions. Over the next 3 days, we will cover solo aging, caregiver resources, and the nature and the environment. Because guess what? We're all on this planet together. It doesn't matter whether we're 95 or we're 5. These are just universal issues for us now. Many of you who are viewing this event today are solo agers. Some of you are overwhelmed by the prospect of aging alone, uncertain about how to begin the planning process, and unclear how you might reach out to others. And I have to tell you, planning is a huge part of moving forward towards a different stage of one's life as you get older. Think about it first. Try to predict what your concerns are, will be, and how you can both best handle them before you're in a situation where you're not sure what to do. Our knowledgeable presenters today will provide you with concrete, manageable steps to help you move forward and feel more connected. Our first speaker is Amy Stein-Milford, the Director of On-Site and Special Programs at DOROT. Amy will share information about DOROT's 6-week solo aging course and their solo aging resource guide. I also want to thank Amy for working with my staff to help develop this session. After Amy, we will hear from Wendell Kornfeld, one of my constituents who has become one of the key solo aging experts. She will share strategies to get beyond the roadblocks that prevent us from starting the planning process. Following Wendell, Alden Prouty, who is a member of Carnegie Hill Village, will talk about what she and her fellow volunteers can offer to connect older people in the district to one another. Most of the solo agers who call my office are women, but men should not be left out of the equation. We are fortunate to have Steve Gurney, the founder and executive director of the Positive Aging Community, to give us a male perspective. And our final speaker today will be Dr. Nan Bauer-Maglin, the author of Gray Love. She will talk about the successes and challenges of online dating. I also want to let everybody know that we put out a senior resource guide, and we try to update it every 2 years. And so we're getting very close to having our new guides ready. And that guide goes into a lot of the territory that our presenters will be talking about, with good resources and contacts for you, including the growing concern for all of my constituents, mental health issues, and how do you get assistance when you need it and confront these issues. I'll also just remind people, we've done many webinars with my office because I have such great staff, and some of them deal exactly with the issues you may have questions about today. So don't forget that you can also go back and listen to previous webinars that we have had presented, because there's some very good information in previous webinars as well. After our final speaker, I will then moderate a Q&A portion of today's event. So now I would like to introduce Amy Stein-Milford. Hello, Amy.
Hello. Thank you so much for the introduction. So I want to say that I'm going to be talking about resources for solo agers, and I have some information that is very particular to the organization I work with, but I just want to say that you, Senator Krueger and Wendy Brennan, and all of the staff are a provider of information, advocacy, and are a real true resource for so many people. So thank you to you for hosting this event. And I am going to share my screen now. And here we go. Can you all see that? There's a thumbs up. Okay. So slides, so resources for solo agers, and what we're going to cover today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about DOROT, which is a nonprofit social service agency. DOROT's Aging Alone Together program, which is designed specifically for people who identify as solo agers. The resource guide that we distribute to all participants in the Aging Alone Together program, and that for the first time, we are going to share with you, even if you have not yet attended Aging Alone Together. I will ask you to think about this question as I'm speaking, and then I'll address it. What is the most important resource in your aging journey? Just to think about what that is. And then I'll talk about resources for social connection and share some recommendations from DOROT solo aging community, and particularly from people who participating in our Aging Alone Together program. So about DOROT, this is a mission that you will find if you visit our website. DOROT alleviates social isolation among older adults and provides services to help people live independently as valued members of the community. We bring generations together in mutually beneficial partnerships of elders, volunteers, and professionals, and our work provides an effective model for others. And just some things to note, we're a nonprofit social service agency. Our base is on the Upper West Side. We also have offices in Westchester, but many of our programs serve people throughout New York City, New York State, and across the country now. Since the pandemic, we have really expanded our outreach. And for us, the idea of social connection, and I'm going to keep coming back to that, is really important. I'll just mention some of the services that we provide: friendly visits, volunteer opportunities to connect with people across generations, an information and resource line. And I oversee a program, on-site and special programs, that offers everything from health, wellness, fitness, legacy projects, art, culture, current events, to programs that are specifically geared to help you on your aging journey. And the last thing I want to say, and it's a personal note, that what this mission does not communicate and is really true to DOROT is the warmth, integrity, and compassion that is part of the values of DOROT, and that I think you will find with whomever you encounter on our staff and amongst our community. So I wanted to highlight this quote from the US Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. Social connection is a fundamental human need, as essential to survival as food, water, and shelter. And this is true. This is a quote from the Surgeon General's Health Advisory, and I want to make clear that this is true for people of all ages, young, old, in the middle, of all socioeconomic backgrounds, and all over the country. So you are not alone in feeling the need for social connection. There are devastating statistics included in the report that I am not going to quote, but that talk about how if you don't have those connections, you're at higher risk for all kinds of disease, depression, other things. But the good news, the very good news, is that there are many things that you can do to take action, and resources that I will share. The first resource I want to share is our Aging Alone Together program, which we have now been offering since 2021, and which is being expanded so that we can serve more and more people, more older adults. I'll tell you a little bit about it. It's a 6-session workshop, 1 session per week, and those sessions provide tools, strategies, support, and resources to age intentionally and plan for the future. But as important as the information that we provide at the session is the opportunity to meet peers who are having some of the very same questions, some of the same challenges that you have. So that kind of opportunity to connect with your peers is built into the structure of the program. And as to who we serve, this is a program for people of all backgrounds, 60 and over, who identify as solo agers. And I know I was asking, we've had people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s attend the session. And just some of the topics that we cover and that you would be able to think about and gather resources for are your social and your support networks, healthcare and end-of-life decisions, aging in place, if you want to age in place, thinking about how to do that in a safe way, and then making a move. We have developed a resource guide in connection with Aging Alone Together. And I want to emphasize that all of you who are attending this workshop will receive a copy of this resource guide with an email that is going out next week. And so I'm not going to cover it item by item. You will have it. It lists over 180 resources. It includes, as I said, social and support networks, benefits and entitlements, resources for housing, home modifications, end of life planning, and much, much more. One of the things I want to emphasize is that this resource guide is a living document, and this is important because one of the things I hope to communicate is the importance of relationships. And so this resource guide began as a 6-page document. It's now a 30+ page document, and as I said, with 180 resources. How did it expand? Through the participants who attended Aging Alone Together, who brought their own experiences, who brought their own resources, and who suggested other kinds of resources that are helpful, are needed, categories that we hadn't considered. Some that I see have come up as questions, emergency alerts, what should I do? So there are resources that are related to that as well. I want to emphasize that in this document, which again you'll receive, we include nonprofit organizations, government agencies, other vetted organizations, but we do not list individual contractors or businesses. And that's important because for those kinds of recommendations, you really, we can be helpful in some ways, but you also want to go through trusted people in your lives. And the last thing I wanted to say is that the resource guide includes resources that are national, but we do have a particular focus on New York City and Westchester, where we are based. So that's a bit about our resource guide. Now, I'd ask you to think about what is the most important resource in your aging journey, and you may all have different thoughts and questions, different thoughts and answers to that question, but I'd like to suggest, as you're probably guessing from what I'm saying, that you are your most important resource, and the people that you know or may get to know are your most important resource. And as the Surgeon General says, it's all about social connection. So that sounds simple, but some of you may be saying, but I don't have that connection. I don't have, I'm a solo ager. I don't have, a person in my life who I can count on. So what I wanted to use the rest of my talk on was really to get you thinking about how to build those social connections, resources for social connection that you can draw on. And the first is drawn from our Aging Alone Together, our second session, which focuses on social and support networks. And it's a chart that some of you may have seen where you think about your relationship circles. You're in the middle, and then the circles expand out. And you can quite literally fill this out. If you want, we can send you a copy of it, and you can fill it out at home and think about who your existing connections are. So in the most intimate circle, that circle of intimacy, these are people you can't imagine your life without. You may have lived with them, you may be living with them now, they may be children, they might be relatives, it might be a therapist, a pet, but in that circle, those with whom you're most intimate and who you really count on in a daily way. The next circle would be your circle of friendship and those people who you are close to. The third circle of participation, and this is one I'm going to talk about a lot, is often when people feel they don't have a person they can appoint as a healthcare proxy or call upon in the middle of the night. This is the circle you should think about. Colleagues, neighbors, members of your faith or support groups, friends of friends. And people that you meet through the activities that you do, and I'll talk about that more. And then finally, the circle of exchange is that most remote circle, people with whom you do transactions, like a doctor, a hairstylist, an acupuncturist, a clerk at your pharmacy. So resources for social connection. Think about your third places, that those people in your life who might be able to help you if you need help, and who also, if, for example, you're looking for a lawyer, a doctor, you're thinking about making a move and you don't know where can I live. There are definitely resources in the resource guide that you will receive. There are resources, I'm sure, on Senator Krueger's resource list, but you should also tap into those resources in your third places, which really is just a term for a place between home, the first place, and work, the second place. And these include, again, faith communities, clubs, 12-step groups, volunteer organizations, libraries and parks, classes, and organizations like DOROT. Certainly, if you take the Aging Alone Together program, for example, this is a 6-session workshop, but I want to emphasize that it doesn't end at the end of those 6 sessions. After you've taken Aging Alone Together, you will be receiving information about all of our adjacent educational programs on medical issues, legal issues, other supportive issues. And you'll also become a member of our alumni group, which meets virtually every month and in person at DOROT on the Upper West Side twice a year. And then third, we have created accountability partners so that we connect people who have similar interests. They're looking to go for a walk. They're looking at housing communities and want a buddy or a partner to do that. So this is one way we're supporting solo agers at DOROT. We are not the only organization doing so. In our resource guide, and I'm sure in Senator Krueger's resource guide, there are other organizations like us that can help you think about these connections. So the last bullet there, any other ideas, you can think about where you can build those connections, make new friends or make new contacts, people who are having the same questions, the same fears, the same struggles that you might be having, partner with them and try to tackle them. And then just some specific recommendations from our solo agers, and I'm going to go quickly. I have just a minute now. I'll read a couple of them out loud to you. Look in unexpected places for leads. Remind yourself you have more resources than you think. You can look through your address book, your birthday cards. Consider hiring an aging life care manager or patient advocate. That does require financial resources. But again, you are the expert and you have the contacts. Be intentional about making this happen. Create space and opportunity to meet people. Don't expect to get it done all in one day. Use the Kaizen method. And I'm going to not explain what the Kaizen method is because I think you will hear more about it with our next speaker. Know that you are not alone in feeling alone, and it's helpful to realize that many other older people are confronting the same issues. And finally, just a success story that was published in the West Side Rag last week. We had a participant in our Aging Alone Together program who needed to make a move for a variety of reasons. She searched the internet, she came up empty. She signed up for our 6-week Zoom workshop called Solo Aging, and it was there in one of the breakout sessions through another person that she heard about the lottery to get into the James Lennox house. So I can't promise you we're going to find you an apartment, but I can say that making those connections is really what is urgent. So I will leave you with this information. We'll be providing you with information about the next session of Aging Alone Together, our resource guide, upcoming Aging Well programs, and other opportunities that we offer for social connection. And I will stop there, and I'd like to introduce the next speaker, who is, I'm going to read the bio that she shared with me, but then I want to say one more thing. So Wendell Kornfeld is the founder and facilitator of Community as Family, an educational group for solo agers that has been meeting at New York City's Temple Emmanuel for almost 9 years. The model for Community as Family has been shared throughout the United States and other countries. And I just want to say this is a very modest bio. Wendell Kornfeld is really, when I started at DOROT, an incredible resource, an incredible sounding board, incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly compassionate and empathetic. And she is going to speak now. And Wendell, I'll help advance the slides for you and we'll mute myself now.
Oh, thank you so much, Amy. It was very, very nice. I'm blushing. Okay, so for those of you who have taken the Aging Alone Together course, you know how important it is to have these critical documents in place for planning. Very important. So, for example, have you started, let alone have you completed? If you care about your stuff, if you care about your savings, if you care about investments and what happens to them, you need a will or a trust. If you are temporarily or permanently unable to do your banking, paying bills, handling your assets, you need a financial power of attorney. If you need someone to speak on your behalf, if you are temporarily or permanently unable to make healthcare decisions, you need to have that healthcare proxy and living will in place. And since all of us are going to pass on at some point, if you care about what happens to your remains, and say if you want to be in a family plot or in a forest setting, whatever, you need to make a plan. So if you haven't started or completed these things, I want to assure you, you are not alone. A lot of people have not, but that doesn't mean you get a pass. We really need to get these things done. So today I am here as your cheerleader. I'm going to help you start or complete these plans by reframing them. I know it looks like a lot of work and it's scary stuff, and yeah, you're right, but we'll reframe it so that it's a little bit easier. So what's the big common roadblock? Next slide, please, Amy. Okay, yeah. All right, so we're all procrastinators. Yes, every one of us, very, very human. You may have something called task paralysis. I just came across this phrase and it's pretty good. Task paralysis means it looks so overwhelming that you don't start, you don't know where to start, and nothing happens. And then that turns into procrastination, and you convince yourself it's going to be too much work, it's going to be too hard. Well, let's think about that. Is it going to be too hard? Thomas Edison had a great quote about that I love to think about. He said, opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and it looks like work. So let's focus on that great word, opportunities, and not think about it so much as work. So here's one way to reframe getting these documents done. Those documents are your insurance and they're your assurance. So for example, I bet a lot of you out there, when you were eligible for Social Security, you didn't say, well, that's going to be a lot of work. I got to figure out who to contact, and I fill out forms, and maybe I need to find documents for proof. That didn't stop you from filing for Social Security. Or when it was time for you to be eligible for Medicare, did you say, well, it's too much work to figure out which plan? There's so many out there. I'm going to have to figure out which plan, and then I have to fill out forms. No, again, you didn't bypass Medicare because it looked like too much work. You knew that Social Security and Medicare were benefits that were going to make your life easier and safer. And you went ahead and did it. You got the work done, and I would like you to look at these other documents we're talking about in the same light, that these are benefits for you. These are going to make your life in the present so much better, because you're not going to be so worried about the future. Next slide, please, Amy. Okay, so let's focus on those benefits and those opportunities. You're going to spend less time dwelling on all those scary what if questions that wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Or am I the only one? I don't think so. Less worry about the future allows greater engagement with the present. And then your support team is going to be empowered. They're going to know what you want. Who's your support team? That healthcare proxy that you're going to name, that power of attorney that you're going to assign, maybe your clergy, your relatives, your close friends, all those people who are going to be part of that planning. You're going to make their job easier, because now they are going to know what you want, and they are going to be so helpful to you. So what you're doing for yourself is a gift, and what you're doing for them is also a gift. Essentially, what you're doing is you're turning the roadblock into a road map for the future. Next slide, please, Amy. Okay. I have a quote that I would like to share with you. There's a science journalist in Sweden at Lund University named Asa Hansdotter. And in July of this year, I found this great quote. She said, "We have everything to gain by looking at life as a journey where preparations for the future provide opportunities for a full life." So again, there's that word, opportunities. So here's one way to break down that task paralysis, and Amy referred to that Kaizen method. It's from this wonderful little book that I read and I use, and I can tell you it works. It's called One Small Step Can Change Your Life, the Kaizen method. And it helps you look at a task as a series of small steps. And I'm talking very small steps. And what's great is those small steps add up and they become progress. So that is one book that I would recommend. The other thing that I would recommend that you do is, again, echoing Amy talking about how people are the most important resource for us. Your community, your friends, find yourself an accountability buddy, as they're called. Tell them what you want to accomplish by getting these documents done. If they want to get the same things done, you can help each other. But share what you want to get done. Give them a little time frame, like I want to get it all done within 3 months or 6 months, or I want to do this one first. But share with them so that they can support you reach that goal. And what's really nice is that they can encourage you, and sometimes they can help you with the research too. And then when you reach each goal and it's accomplished, once you go out and celebrate, which is another great thing to do with community. Okay, so last slide, please, Amy. Yes, so again, thank you. And I just want to say one other thing. You have the choice not to do these documents, not to do this planning. It's always your choice. However, let's go back to that science journalist that I quoted before from Lund University in Sweden. She said, putting things off means you risk falling behind in terms of opportunities to affect how you want to live as an older person. I love that. How you want to live as an older person. So I hope that I have assured you that you're not alone. Success is within your reach. I hope you have new incentive to get started, to start things, to complete things, and with a new attitude for the future. And remember the quote I just gave you. Think about how you want to live as an older person. That can start as early as today. I wish you luck. I thank you for listening. And now we're going to turn this over to our colleague, Alden Prouty of Carnegie Hill Village.
Hello, I'm Alden, and I'm a member of Carnegie Hill Village. We started our organization thinking about it in 2016, and it took another year or so to get going. We are a way to how to live as an older person, and anybody who lives between 98th and 79th from Fifth Avenue to the river. We don't have anybody on boats yet who joined, but they would be welcome. And we have a lot of activities and organizations and things that people can join, but we are definitely a social resource. And you'll get our website so you can look at that, but I want to go into how we started and why we started. Many of us had read an article years and years ago in the Times about Beacon Hill Village, where people in that area in Boston were helping each other. And it just, I remember, it's one of those things, I remember the day I read it, I thought, what a great idea. So 15 or 20 years later, there were calls about starting our own organization. And so we talked about what we should do and find out what people wanted. And we did a survey through Carnegie Hill Neighbors to 11,000 people. We got a very good response. And it turns out that people weren't looking for someone to walk them to the doctor or do errands and things like that. They wanted to get together. So we focus on being a social organization. And we have all sorts of activities. We have weekly activities. For instance, in Central Park, there's a walk twice a week with other members and at different speeds, depending on how you can walk. And then we have all sorts of activities every month. We have dinners at local restaurants for up to 20. Sometimes it's just 6 or 8, and people have to sign up for them, and they have to sign up fast because they're very popular. We have groups. I think one of the first groups that got started was a knitting group. We have a men's group. We have a history group. I run a short story group where we read a short story every month and talk about it. And then we have talks. We've had all sorts of interesting talks. We had one on memory and aging, assessing your cognitive function with a wonderful speaker from Mount Sinai, which has been a great resource for us. And we have, let's see, I'm just trying to think here what else we have, but discussion groups of all kinds, and mindfulness and meditation. And we partner with health advocates and have also the resources of search and care. So we're connected within the neighborhood and love that part of it. Let me see. So we have a bulletin board where people can post services or things that they do, and that is not always looked at. I don't know, there's something about a static thing but it's very useful. We just put up somebody who runs a bookkeeping service who's terrific. We have now about 160 members, and we're always eager for more. It costs $100 a year to join, and if that's a burden, we can manage that. And it's just such a nice way to get together. There are concerts several times a year, and we have a concert and then a glass of wine afterwards, and people can talk. So that is basically it. It's a lot of fun. It's very warm and welcoming, and people, as the times go by, really get to know each other. And I found just with the short story group, there are maybe 12 or 13 of us. Sometimes we're together, but we're together more on Zoom now. But people, the things in the stories bring up something that happened in someone's own life, and they tell us about it. And we really begin to know each other very well. And it's a great benefit. So I just want to encourage anybody who would like to join, please go on the website, carnegiehillvillage.org, and join us. It would be a wonderful thing. Thank you. So I am to introduce our next speaker, who is Steve Gurney.
Well, thanks, Alden. And I happen to actually be the founder of a village in my community. It's a great resource for solo agers, but for all generations. And that's a great concept. So in any event, my name's Steve Gurney, and I am the founder and director of the Positive Aging Community. And we have regular discussions on the topic of solo aging. I just dropped into chat some links so that you could check out some of the discussions that we had and what we've got coming up. But today, I'm going to kick off a brief talk about solo aging from a male perspective. And so, first off, did you know that 49% of single, it's 49% of women over the age of 65 are single, but only 21% of men over the age of 65 are single. And we already know that women tend to outlive men. So this really speaks to a supply and demand issue of men and women over a certain age, which really might be also helpful when thinking about on our next session that's on that follows me on online dating. But it also speaks to the topics and connections for those men who identify themselves as solo agers. So earlier this year, I ran a course on for solo agers on building your own personal village. Some of the things that we've talked about already here is making connections and what have you. So in this group, we had 38 attendees, but only one man. And throughout the course, he regularly commented on how the topics and conversations might be different if we had a few more men. And he was always reminding us, is there a way we could get more men involved in this course? We did whatever we could, but when I went back and I looked at our solo aging discussions over the last 3 years, it ended up looking like for every 100 attendees that we had, that only 10 were men, and then half of those men were professionals working in the field of geriatrics and aging. So really, for every 100 males that are individuals identifying as solo agers, about 5 were men. And so this can present a real challenge for a male who identifies and is looking for resources as a solo ager. Now, my time's limited, so I just want to share a few ideas and perspectives that might help if you are helping somebody, or if you find yourself male and looking for resources as a solo. So one thing that I've noticed is there's a radical difference between someone who suddenly finds themselves solo through, passing away of their partner or what have you, and somebody who's been single long-term. Okay. In the case of the gentleman I was referring to earlier, he really felt like he was in the middle of girl talk in this course, and it was harder for him to relate to the other members of the group. Now, there's not much we could do here. We really did try to embrace his suggestions, but I think one word of wisdom here is just we all need to take a wider field of vision on our life, friendships, and how we find purpose as we move through the chapters of life. And our perceptions of who we are and purpose can change over our lifespan, and we need to have a little bit more flexibility there. Okay. But let's imagine that you've got a male friend who's widowed and navigating the world solo for the first time. Perhaps his wife or partner was sort of like the cruise ship director in that relationship, and sort of led the charge in making friendships and setting up activities. You can see how this could be rather challenging. So here's a few things to think about. Number one, this scenario that I'm bringing up, and I've talked to many people like this, is that this gentleman may have not had close friends who were women outside his wife. So attending something like a solo aging group that is dominated by women might be awkward. And the other thing in this scenario is that women may represent more romantic relationships for him as opposed to friendships. And this may be hard and something that he may or may not be ready for. And it also might be harder for this gentleman to relate to his male friends now who are married, even though he was out on the golf course or enjoying things with them just a few weeks earlier. So I want to briefly share just one other story and then kind of wrap this up. And this is a gentleman that I wrote an article about several years ago. He was recently widowed, living in a suburban neighborhood where he and his wife raised their children, and he was feeling isolated. And at the encouragement of his friends, they all said, "Hey, why don't you move to an active adult community?" And so he moved down the road to this active adult community. It was nice, but what he found was most of the friends he were making were either married or playing golf, and he really didn't feel connected on either one of those things. And so he started reflecting on his life, his past interests and what have you. And he reflected on the fact that his happiest days were when he was living in downtown Philadelphia as an artist. And then later, after that, he moved to the suburbs to raise a family. So he began traveling all around the country to different cities. And by surprise, he announces to his friends and family that he found an apartment that he was going to move to in downtown Baltimore, where he had absolutely no friends or connections, but he loved the neighborhood. It was near an art gallery. It was a very artistic neighborhood. And he reported that this move, he absolutely loved it. He was making intergenerational connections, living in a walkable, car-free environment. And it was just an example of reinventing yourself as a male, as a solo. And lastly, I want to kind of close on most of our solo aging discussions, whether we're talking about advanced care planning, legal issues, what have you, they always seem to migrate to the topic of making friends. Most of the folks attending these discussions cite that they have not made new friends in decades, okay? And we already had some good resources that you can tie into making friends, whether you're a male or a female, from Amy and Alden and our other panelists. But a few words of wisdom that I've sort of gleaned that might be helpful, regardless of you being male or female. And then the first is sort of like my artistic friend: make a list of things that you're interested in or you were interested in the past. And then do a little bit of research on joining clubs, volunteering, talk to folks that you know about these interests, okay? And then now, as you're joining these communities, you got your radar open for other solos, other people living sort of the same lifestyle that you are. The benefit of this approach is that we're making connections around things that people are passionate about, not around age, not around being single or widowed, but around, art or a hobby or a sport. And this, I have found, can be helpful, whether you're male or female. But in closing, as I kind of turn this over to Dr. Dan Bauer-Maglin, just be sensitive to those males that are out there. There are more females out in the world, especially as we grow older, and there are more single female that are out there, solos over 65, than there are men. And and just think about this in terms of a sensitivity aspect and the way that we communicate. And if you are a solo male out there, just really look like my artistic friend. This can be an exciting time to reinvent yourself and redefine your new lot in life. So with that, I'm really charged up to turn this over to Dr. Nan Bauer, who's going to be talking about the successes and challenges of online dating. And hopefully I teed this up okay there for you, Nan.
Yes, Steve. In fact, you use statistics that I'm going to use, so it really works well. As Steve says, I'm going to talk about the successes and challenges of online dating. I will use my own experience and refer to the experience of some of the 45 people who wrote for my book, Gray Love, Stories About Dating and New Relationships After 60. And I have a cold, so I'm sort of sounding very thick. And I will sort of talk and read because I have a lot of specifics that I want to get over. A little over a year after my husband of 36 years died of pancreatic cancer, I was keeping very busy and had lots to do, but I was lonely for a man's companionship and caring. So I ventured to online dating. No longer the bar, the workplace, the friend of a friend. Now meeting out online is displacing all other ways to connect. Senior singles in America make up one of the fastest growing demographics for online dating. So I figured I would try. I was about 75 then. After trying OkCupid, because it was free, I moved on to Match because, like most people, I had heard of it and figured the pool would be greatest there than on other sites. There are many, many sites for very specific interests or identities, like JDate or Black Singles. And there are also sites for older people, like Our Time and Silver Singles. And these sites are proliferating all the time. You can just go online and Google sites for older people. First, I had to decide, and I'm going to talk about the process of going online dating. First, I had to decide what I should write about myself. Looking back on it, my profile seems rather conventional. As a woman, you need to figure out how to stand out. In writing his profile, Gray Love contributor Vincent Valenti listed 28 aspects he wanted in a partner and more than 20 aspects about himself. So he really stood out. I said I was 70. Everyone lowers their age. Not surprisingly, most men want younger women. Then I had to decide what pictures of myself to post. Enid, a friend with online experience, wanted me to henna my hair so it wouldn't be gray. She said gray was not good. I refused since I wanted to remain me, even as I worried about this decision. Advice has it that you should show yourself in at least one picture with your grandkids or your kids, but do not emphasize the motherly role and display only one picture of yourself with a pet. Next, should I wait for men to write me or take the initiative? The site suggests that initiating conversation increases your chances of finding a suitable match, since you're finding instead of waiting to be found. My friend also advised that I should date at least 7 men before allowing myself to get discouraged, but cautioned me not to waste my time on people who had sites, who the sites say that had lower than a 90% match to me. Apparently the algorithms are reasonably good at finding a suitable suitor. At each stage, I had to make decisions. After someone contacts you, how long before you move from writing to talking or meeting? Little things like what to wear if we're having our first coffee date seem kind of major, especially for a woman with an aging body. For those of us who are emerging from a long-term relationship because of death or divorce, dating another person, man or woman, is awkward, to say the least. I got discouraged quickly. Over a year or so, I met about 9 men on Match and 1 on OkCupid. One man I particularly liked disappeared after a second date. I soon learned that's called ghosting. One interested me because of his taste in books, but he was more than 10 years younger. We have since become good friends. If you have the right mindset you can treat all this internet dating as an adventure. Even though many of the women writing in Gray Love had been on multiple dates for many years, they were not discouraged. And they were not bitter. Many did not see dating as a waste of time. They felt each encounter was an adventure and or a learning experience. For example, after going on 150 dates, from her early 50s to her early 70s, Alice Freed can still write that her online dating gave texture to her life. Or Stephanie Brown, who had been on 39 first dates, can still declare that she got something from everyone, like learning tango or adopting a cat. Apparently, there's lots of burnout for those who use online dating apps in their search for human connection. A survey of single reports of 500 18 to 54-year-olds concluded that nearly 80% said they experienced emotional burnout or fatigue with online dating. I would expect that women get more discouraged than men, and older people get more discouraged than younger people. Dating after 60 is certainly hard for women, as the ratio of older men to available older women would suggest, and Steve mentioned that. For women, roughly half of women over 65 are without partners, whereas for men, the percentage is only 21. A Pew Research Center report says that lesbian, gay, and bisexual adults are having more success in becoming partnered using online dating sites than heterosexual adults. Back to my story. At 75, I did not want an adventure. I wanted a companion. At 75, the clock is ticking rather loudly. I took a short break. However, I did return to the online pursuit, and I did find somebody I liked. Now in our 80s, we see each other about twice a week. Neither of us wants a full-time live-in relationship. Older people, especially, are experimenting with alternative arrangements like living apart together, which is called LAT. There are lots of positives finding a partner in your later years, but there are challenges. When I started looking for a partner, I was concerned that I might meet a man who had some chronic illness or life-threatening illness. I did not want to be a caretaker. Many of us have done that already. And even if it's not a serious illness, we are dealing with the realities that time and age have wrought on our bodies, from sagging skin to, for some, a decrease in libido. In addition to physical changes, older daters have had more time to develop complicated histories that include previous long-term relationships and breakups. They must navigate often negative reactions from family and friends to their online dating. To sum it up, for me, it took over a year of some mediocre encounters, but online dating did work for me. For a woman past 70, I know the likelihood of finding such a connection is slim, but it can happen. And it can be a positive experience despite one's age. And also, if you share your online experience, maybe create a group of people who are doing it the same and share what you're experiencing, it can also create community for you. Thanks.
Well, thank you, everyone. Each of you were so extraordinary in your presentations. I just wanted to let you keep going. I'm going to ask everybody to come back on with their picture and their voice so we can start to get to some of the questions. And there are not a huge number of questions left because, in fact, I think you did such a good job of answering questions that people had raised in advance and with your materials. But since Nan just finished, let me just ask her, and it ties back into, I think, Steve's point also with men. So people use these dating sites to meet someone, quote unquote, in a more traditional model of dating. And women tend to, I find, actually have larger social circles for themselves than a lot of men, going all the way back to how we acculturate boys versus girls when we're young. Does anybody use like an online model for men to just meet other men, to socialize with, to find activities in common? You mentioned, Nan, that they seem to be pretty good with these algorithms of matching people up. Does anybody match people up for friendship, not just dating?
That's interesting.
Well-
Maybe Steve will know that more than I know. But as I said, I did get a friend out of the
Right.
dating online, and so you could try. You could say, I'm interested in having male friends, not for love or sex, but for, you know, friendship. But I don't know. There must be online communities. Steve, do you know of any?
Yeah, the tough thing is that to find these ways to make friend connections, especially with men, you can't be searching the dating sites. It's got to be more interest-based and for obvious reasons. And but this is a big problem. I'll share a quick story. There's an unbelievable documentary film out there called The Age of Love. And it's about finding love over a certain age. And it profiled a speed dating event in Rochester, New York. And the community center that I'm involved with had this great idea. Hey, look, on Valentine's Day, we're going to do this screening and we're going to encourage people to date. Well, as you can imagine, you know, basically 70 women and, you know, 10 men showed up to this thing. And so what they ended up doing the following year, as opposed to making it the Age of Love, they sort of transitioned the event on Valentine's to just making friends. And it's a tough thing. It really is.
And I guess, Steve, where is the community or neighborhood village that you're part of?
Well, I didn't want to sort of reveal the fact that I am unfortunately not a city dweller. I am in Northern Virginia. The name of the community is Reston, Virginia. But I am delighted to be involved in this discussion because one of the things that I preach is how wonderful an urban environment is to be a place to grow old at any age. And there's, you know, not being in a car dependent area, being in an intergenerational setting is so positive. And my daughter is graduating from high school in the next year. And my hope is that I can encourage my wife and I to move to a more urban environment.
Great. And I guess, Alden, I know about your program with Carnegie Hill Neighbors. Is there a master list somewhere of other equivalent programs in other parts of the city? That's a couple of questions that are coming in. What if I don't live in the Carnegie Hill area?
Well, there's something called the Village to Village Network, which shows where all the, and you can just go online, villagetovillagenetwork.org. It shows where all these groups are. And I know that there's one on the west side called Bloomingdale Aging in Place. I believe there's one in the Village. And I know there's a Good Friends at Park Slope. And it takes a lot of work to get one of these started, but they are so satisfying. So we're always glad to help people how to show them how to start one. So if anybody's thinking of that, get in touch with Carnegie Hill Village.
And then Dana from my staff just put up on the chat the website for Village to Village Network, because I know a number of people have been typing in questions about, what if I live up here? What if I live down there? And of course, we try to make these webinars as accessible to anyone who wants to watch them as possible. Probably none of us are going to join yours in Reston, Virginia, though, Steve. Although, thank you for sharing that. All right, so we talked a little bit about mental health resources. And is there any specific programs that any of you would like to mention that you think are particularly valuable for people to learn about in order to confront some of the mental health concerns they're having right now? I don't mean individual doctors, because obviously we have great medical institutions and assorted doctors, but are there any programs out there that anyone's aware of that are particularly useful, you know, either online or in person, for talking about the mental health concerns that,
Well,
older
you know,
people having solo? Yes, Steve.
I'd love to, I'm a huge fan of therapy. Okay. It served me well through my lifetime, but the fact that we're on this online discussion is that anybody that's on this discussion today has the ability to participate in online therapy, and it's incredibly affordable. It's private. It's, which minimizes some of the stigma of having to go to an office to talk to, you know, a therapist. And I just think it's a huge opportunity to, you know, to just talk to somebody who's objective, who is, who you can run some ideas by if you're struggling for any reason mentally. But let's say that it's, you know, you're a newly minted solo ager, and you're kind of dealing with that, is just being aware how accessible and affordable online therapy is.
And I just want to add to that, because I had seen that question beforehand. And I asked at DOROT, we have an INR, an information and resources specialist. And she had sent me, we don't include these in Aging Alone Together, but I can provide them. And one of them is a service program for older people, SPOP, offering individual and group therapy for people 55 and older. And there are a couple of other resources that she mentions. So I'm happy in that follow-up email that's going to be sent out to forward these. And you can also always reach out to our INR information and resources person if this is really a pressing need, and she may have suggestions.
Great. And yes, it is true. You know, telemedicine options have broadened, as well as the ability to go to do online therapy. Much insurance actually does cover at least some number of mental health private visits per year. It varies by your insurance company and whether or not you're Medicare. You know, one of the issues we're having up here in New York, we just have a shortage of mental health professionals, even to sign up with online mental health services. But yes, there are definitely options out there. Another question we got, and I think I'm just going to try to explain. So, can you recommend a good lawyer who specializes in elder care? My husband has recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and we need to update our wills. My office doesn't make specific recommendations to specific lawyers, but the New York City Bar Association does have a phone number you can call to get a referral. And there are a number of specific bar associations, and there probably is one for senior planning. I just can't remember. So there are a number of different bar associations, and the reaching one, the New York City Bar Association, that does have a referral service. So although if you ask my office, we won't give you a list. We can certainly give you the phone numbers of the groups we think do referrals. We've also, I just want to reference, we've had a number of webinars that get involved with the physical exercise options for seniors, and There are really some terrific groups, even overlapping. I think DOROT is part of that project also, where you can get involved with literally classes in all kinds of physical health activity just from your home. So if you're on a computer watching us today, you can also start to participate in physical activities in your home, on your computer screen. There are a number of really terrific programs right throughout Manhattan and the city. Then if you happen to, I think if you're Medicare, you either have silver sneakers or you can get silver sneakers relatively inexpensively. So that is various health classes for people over 60. We've also had some guests who presented about yoga and meditation, because a lot of this is mindset and how you are feeling about yourself. So I definitely want to refer people back, and in our resource guide, and I'm sure in the DOROT resource guide, there are some examples of really good resources to keep your body healthy as well as your mind healthy. And those two go together so much, especially if you find yourself, less able to go out and explore the world as often as you might have wanted. And you are living alone, being able to participate in health health programs and exercise programs for yourself also is very important. Oh, yes, Amy.
I just wanted to say two things to what you just said regarding first the legal resources. I would agree that we only list agencies as well. And I would also include, just point out, the New York Legal Assistance Group, NILAG, if you are income eligible, is a great resource. But that also speaks to that idea of your own social connections, that when it comes to finding, because they'll have a long list of people, the best thing to do is to ask trusted people in your network what their experiences are. Can they suggest anyone who's had a similar experience? And then also with the exercise and what you just said about health and mental health, both physical and mental health, that is so important. And we have seen at DOROT the continuing need, even as the sort of state of the pandemic changes, for continuing to provide virtual classes along with the in-person as well.
I think that I'll aim this one at Wendell. There's a question about guardianship and alternatives when you don't have your own family to help. And you were talking about planning, the documents and figuring out who, what, where. I know, and I will just reference that in the resource list that we put up somewhere, and they'll put it up again for us right now. There's a new phone number you can call for Guardianship Helpline if you have concerns about guardianship or don't even know how to start with that, because one of the things that we've learned is families and friends may want to be your guardians and may want to help you with your financial situation or oversight, but they don't even know what they're doing when they get into it. So they also need some help to learn how to be good guardians and good planners with you. So my staff will put up that phone number again for the new Guardianship Helpline. But I wonder if you had other experience with that, Wendell, what you do when people, they think they're doing the right thing, but they get themselves caught up where neither of them knows what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, guardianship is certainly a specialty, and it's considered the last resort, because sometimes you end up with a stranger and sometimes that stranger is not working in your best interest. What I will say is, just a couple of days ago, I was just checking the date, on the 18th of October, I watched a Zoom meeting done by PSS, Presbyterian Social Services, which is also another community-based organization. And it was all about guardianship. They're doing a two-parter. It was part one. If you Google Project Guardianship, you will find an awful lot of information how in New York City this is approached. And in my notes, it said one of the things that they do is give training to the person that you may have picked to be your guardian. Because as the senator said, this is not something we're all born knowing how to do. So I would just encourage people to check out Project Guardianship online for
Great.
more information.
And that is the group who I was referenced, the same group that has
Ah.
national helpline phone number. So thank
Excellent. Good, good.
Good, good. So I think we're growing resources as we speak, recognizing a larger and larger percentage of our population are in fact 60 and older. And you know, the needs you have below 60 are different than the needs you're going to have at 90 also. So we need to be making sure we've got the resources and people with the skills to deal with all these different categories. All right, this is always the very toughest one that comes into my office all the time. You're older and you really need to find someone else, somewhere else to live. Maybe you actually are in a building there, the landlord has decided you're not desirable and he's going to evict you, or not to be sexist, he or she is going to evict you. Maybe you're living in a walk-up building, which was fine when you were 35. But climbing up 3 sets of stairs every time you leave the building, isn't that realistic when you're 75 or 85? How do you find good quality housing when you need to move as an older New Yorker? Anybody want to take a shot?
I'll start. And I agree that is probably one, if not the hardest questions that comes up in our Aging Alone Together sessions. And it can be heartbreaking. You know, someone's lived in an apartment for their entire life or adult life, and then for any variety of reasons has to move. And I wish I could say I had a silver bullet great solution and the resource to provide. There are some resources in the resource guide and Senator Krueger's, I'm sure, resources that will give you a sense of the lay of the land, the types of communities, be it if you want to live on your own in an assisted living community and other communities. But I think just know it's challenging, that you're not alone in that challenge, that you should do your research, you should talk to as many people as you can, put your name in lotteries as one of our participants did, and be flexible on certain things, including neighborhood, where you might live. You know, you have to, it's very, very expensive and hard in New York City.
But we always tell everyone when they contact us, even if you feel like it's a little overwhelming, you go on to the New York City housing site and you make an application where you have to fill in all your information onto their computer. So maybe somebody can help you. And then you basically start applying for any lottery that is taking place in the city of New York. So pretty much all subsidized and senior and affordable housing that's new and is likely to have openings has a system where people apply, and based on their eligibility, and there's age categories and income categories and special needs categories, that your application, then you put it in for every site that you might fit into an eligibility box for, and you actually hope you'll win the lottery. And some people say, you know, are my chances as bad as winning an actual lottery? No, your chances aren't that bad, but your chances are pretty tough since our demand is so much greater than our supply. But I always tell everyone, if you don't make the application, you're pretty much guaranteed you're never going to win a lottery for a unit in a building. So we always encourage people to go through that process. And we also just emphasize, you're less likely to find a slot here in Manhattan where you're living, or if you're living here already, because there's less affordable housing being built here because we're so densely populated. There's not a lot of land, and the land is insanely expensive. So you have to keep your mind open to exploring a new neighborhood where you might actually get a slot in a lovely brand new building. So I definitely encourage people to explore that option for themselves. And frankly, the earlier you start thinking about that, the better, because it does take a long time for something to come up. So part of, I think, planning for aging, and Wendy, my great staff person who sort of orchestrates all these, and I've talked about this a lot. And we do a lot of programs we call for seniors and boomers, because the baby boomers are actually the people who should be thinking about all of this for ourselves and starting the planning for when we define ourselves as actually in need of these things. We shouldn't be waiting till we're 75 or 70 or 80. We should be really exploring this, you know, starting at 55, in my opinion, and thinking through, all right, how am I going to deal with all these issues later? So I think housing and the concept of looking for alternative housing is something that you do start earlier in the process, because it's perhaps the toughest adjustment in my experience. Okay, somebody asked, let me just double check, other questions are coming in that I missed. Oh, does DOROT do any meetings on the east side, or you have to go to the west side if you want to go in person?
We are on the Upper West Side for our in-person programs. There is a volunteer 6 times a year. We have a sort of volunteer package delivery, and there is an Upper East Side location, but all the other programs are up here in
Great.
person.
Okay, and my staff put up also on chat, yes, there's another group here called the New York Foundation for Senior Citizen Home Sharing Program. So sometimes you may be living alone in an apartment that actually has 2 bedrooms when there's just one of you, and you may be open to having a roommate, and they may help with the financial side of paying rent in New York, as well as perhaps being someone to socialize with. But you have to be very careful about who you let come and live in your home. So the Foundation for Senior Citizen Home Sharing Program basically does matchmaking. And so also if you need someplace to live, the same story. So their website, their website is up there on the chat right now, and it'll be sent to everybody. And then there's also New York City Housing Connect, which is the website for applying for all the affordable housing in New York City. Somebody's asking, can you apply for one of the housing lotteries if you currently own a co-op for many years and have no other savings? I don't know, but if you actually call my office, somebody there will be able to help you with that answer, because there are resource limits and income limits. And on a lot of programs, the current home you live in doesn't apply as an asset. But if you're going to look to move somewhere else where you already own a home, I think they're probably going to count that as an asset. So I don't want to say yes or no, and we can follow up on that. And it's 3:25. I've just double checked my watch, which is the point in this event that I'm supposed to profusely thank all of our guests, who were all extremely knowledgeable and helpful and diverse and gave us all kinds of additional ideas. So I want to thank everyone so much. And I want to thank my own staff, with whom I could not function, without whom I could never even function, but certainly for these events. And I want to remind everybody that you should tune in tomorrow, the 25th, from 2 to 3:45 for our second session on caring for caregivers. And then, if we haven't worn you out, tune in again Thursday from 2 to 3:30 for our final session on nature and the environment. And I also want to just remind people that I am doing my first live town hall in a very long time. Actually, since March 2020, that's the last live event my office did. But on Tuesday, October 31st, which some people think of as Halloween, But for me, it's the night of my first town hall meeting at Carnegie Hall. I've finally made it to the stage of Carnegie Hall from 6 to 8 p.m. And we're going to have a number of key policy guests and key policy issues that we're going to be discussing, along with updates on the 24 Albany legislative issues. There's an RSVP link for this event listed in the chat, and seating is limited, so you have to sign up. And if you cannot attend, please let us know so we can give your seat to someone on the waiting list. So again, to my guests, thank you so much for your participation today. It's very much appreciated. And for everybody who joined us today, thank you for joining. Stay safe, mask up in indoor public spaces, and wash your hands. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.